The 2024 postseason test is finally behind us, and we're starting to get a clearer picture of how teams are shaping up for the 2025 season. There were plenty of takeaways from the 9-hour test, but let's talk about what stood out the most. Some big names like Lewis Hamilton weren't there, and that's got everyone asking what impact will that have on the upcoming season? And just as importantly, what have the teams and drivers learned from their first chance to drive the new cars? One of the biggest surprises of the test in Abu Dhabi was Carlos Sainz, who really turned heads. Driving for Williams, he managed to post the second fastest time of the day, completing 146 laps, just 13 laps fewer than the man who did the most, Liam Lawson. Sainz had been leading the pack for a majority of the day, until Lawson edged him out at sunset to finish at the top of the timesheets. But here's the interesting part: Sainz's time was faster than the qualifying time set by Alex Albon just a few days earlier in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Now, times like these don't always tell the full story. There are a lot of factors at play, like fuel loads, engine settings, and tire choices, which can all influence the lap times. But given the expectations going into the test where the goal wasn't to push the cars to their absolute limit, it's impressive that Sainz was able to outpace Albon's time. This might be a sign that Williams is gearing up to be a more competitive team in 2025, consistently fighting for points. With new backing from Santander after their long partnership with Ferrari, Sainz has certainly given Williams something to think about in terms of their future performance. The positive surprises didn't stop there. Nico Hülkenberg, once again, showed why he's the kind of driver every team wants when it comes to maximizing performance. After returning to Formula One following a 3-year break, Hülkenberg has been nothing short of impressive. He helped Haas climb up the Constructors' Championship, and in this tire test he finished 4th, just behind Sainz and George Russell, and ahead of rookie Andrea Antonelli. Hülkenberg managed 113 laps, showcasing his consistency and experience. Meanwhile, his teammate, F2 champion Enzo Bortoleto, didn't have the same success. Despite driving 130 laps, he could only set the 18th fastest time. The Brazilian's goal wasn't necessarily to shine in this test, but to get used to F1 machinery, a task he'll continue to work on as the season progresses. Speaking of rookies, there were plenty of fresh faces putting in impressive performances. One name that stood out was Kimi Antonelli. Despite recovering from the flu, the young Italian put in a strong showing, setting the 5th fastest time of the day. He completed 62 laps in total, a relatively low number, but his performance showed that he has the potential to handle pressure. Antonelli's competitive spirit bodes well for Mercedes, who'll be looking for big things from him in the future. Though this tire test wasn't his time to prove everything, it's clear that he's approaching the challenge with focus and determination. All eyes were also on Yuki Tsunoda, who had his first outing with Red Bull in 4 years. While the lap times may not have looked spectacular on paper, we have to keep in mind that the goals for Red Bull in this test were unclear. Tsunoda finished with the 7th fastest time after completing 127 laps, but he was outpaced by both of his Red Bull teammates during the session. Despite not being the fastest, Tsunoda was content with his performance and showed confidence in his understanding of the car's limitations. He mentioned that he didn't struggle to adapt and felt positive about how the car handled. Tsunoda even said he felt more comfortable than ever, and his team principal Christian Horner was quick to back him up, stating that Tsunoda is more than ready to step up if needed. This leads to an interesting situation at Red Bull. Tsunoda's performance, along with Lawson's, could decide who partners Max Verstappen in 2025. But there's more to this decision than just on-track results. If either driver is promoted, Red Bull would have to pay a hefty price to terminate Sergio Perez's contract, around $16 million. That's a huge financial hit for the team, especially when you consider the sponsorship revenue and prize money they'd lose. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out in the coming months. Now, let's talk about Liam Lawson, the New Zealander who's been turning heads with his performances. Lawson, who completed the most laps during the test, minus 159 in total, has shown that he's a driver with a lot of potential. Although his fastest lap was only good enough for 13th place, far behind his teammate, Lawson's extensive lap count speaks volumes about his commitment to understanding the car. It's clear that teams were running different tire allocations and setups, which can make direct comparisons a little tricky. But Lawson's hard work throughout the day should not go unnoticed. However, it's curious that neither Lawson nor Tsunoda seemed to push harder in this test. Was this a deliberate choice by Red Bull, or were they just running different setups to gather more data? It's possible that they were more focused on gathering long-term information, rather than trying to set the fastest times. But given how important this test was for determining who could potentially fill Perez's seat in 2025, it raises some questions about how serious Red Bull is about promoting either Lawson or Tsunoda. One big name missing from the test was none other than Lewis Hamilton. The 7-time world champion is at an important crossroads in his career, with 2024 potentially being his final season with Mercedes. While Hamilton's absence from the tire test was expected, it's clear that not participating could have some consequences for his transition to Ferrari. Hamilton is currently involved in various off-track duties, including visiting Mercedes headquarters and spending time with sponsors. Although he knew his schedule wouldn't allow him to take part in the test, he admitted that missing it would hurt his preparation for the upcoming season. In his words, the delay definitely makes the start of the year harder, but he's determined to bounce back. Despite this, Hamilton remains optimistic about his future, even if this test has left him playing catch-up. As he prepares for his new chapter with Ferrari, there's growing concern about how smoothly the transition will go, especially after Hamilton was outpaced by George Russell in the final stages of the 2024 season. Former world champion Nico Rosberg has shared his thoughts, noting that if Hamilton's form continues to dip, he might struggle at Ferrari. Rosberg highlighted that Ferrari hired Hamilton to compete at the same level as Charles Leclerc and challenge for world championships, so if Hamilton doesn't regain his top form, it could be a challenging journey ahead. As we look toward the future, one team to watch closely is McLaren. The 2024 Constructors' Champions are making bold moves, preparing to take their car concept to the next level for 2025. McLaren has learned from Red Bull's dominance in 2023 and understands that in order to stay ahead, they can't just evolve, they need to revolutionize. While making huge leaps might be challenging under the current regulations, McLaren is ready to push the boundaries as much as possible. In the recent tire test, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris showed strong performances, although their lap times were a bit deceiving. Piastri, with only 72 laps completed, ended up 19th on the timesheet, which doesn't tell the full story. Norris also had a relatively low lap count of 84, but he finished in 16th place, well behind his teammate. It's important to remember that these times were set throughout the day as track conditions evolved, and some drivers weren't able to set their best times on a track that had more rubber laid down by the end of the day. Still, McLaren's strategy to focus on long-term data and the evolution of their car might explain why they didn't focus as much on setting fast laps. With the 2025 season on the horizon, McLaren's ability to continue their rise in the standings could depend on how well they adapt and innovate their car design. So, with all the testing and reshuffling we've seen, the big question remains who came out as the biggest winner from the tire test. While it's tough to draw definitive conclusions from just one test session, it's clear that some teams and drivers have a lot to think about as they prepare for 2025. Williams, with Carlos Sainz leading the charge, looks set to be more competitive in the midfield, and teams like Haas and Mercedes have reason to feel optimistic about their future prospects. McLaren is pushing hard to stay ahead, and the Red Bull drivers' battle for the second seat will only heat up. As for the drivers, rookies like Kimi Antonelli and Enzo Bortoleto are showing potential, and veterans like Nico Hülkenberg are proving that experience still counts in this ever-evolving sport. Tsunoda and Lawson too have shown they're ready for the challenge, though it remains to be seen who will secure that coveted spot next to Verstappen in 2025. With the new season just around the corner, the tire test results have given us a glimpse into what's to come, but there's still plenty of time for teams to refine their cars and adjust their strategies. As we head into the next chapter of Formula One thing's for sure, 2025 is shaping up to be another thrilling season.